Hey, how's it going and welcome to another video. Oh man, are you guys excited for all the up-and-coming Atlus titles such as, Well yeah, as of right now, the only Atlus game that's on the horizon is the Etrian Odyssey collection. But yeah, once the Etrian Odyssey collection comes out, pretty much all of their big franchises are like on pause. So I figured now would be a good time to talk about what I think is going on with some of these bigger properties they have, what to kind of expect in the immediate or maybe even far future, what I think is probably not coming out anytime soon. And I wanted to start by talking about a game that I don't think I've talked about on the channel basically at all, and that is a little ditty called Project Re Fantasy. I'd imagine there's a lot of people who don't even know what this is because it was announced. I had to like double check this. This kind of freaked me out. This was like announced in 2016. Almost 7 years ago. For context, this was from before the West had Persona 5. That's how long ago this was. Like, it was announced in 2016, and we got a trailer for it in 2017 that showed essentially nothing. And all that we really know about it is that it was going to be more so kind of a medieval sort of game. Like, it was a more fantasy kind of game, obviously. We've got some very nice Soejima art, like Soejima was doing the art for it. And there's like a couple other little tidbits, like some of the people who were working on it. And beyond that, it was kind of just left up in the air. So it begs the question, where is this video game? Because a game going 6 years with no trailer, like, for as much as people like to kind of fuss about SMT5 and its kind of like lack of trailers and updates, it sure as hell didn't go 6 years without any kind of trailer, right? This wasn't like an SMT5 or a Persona 5 where people were really hounding for the game because it was part of like a long kind of established franchise. No, Project Re Fantasy was started just this weird thing that they announced, and unless you were really into Atlus games, you probably kind of just forgot about it. Man, this game never even got, like, a platform announced. They never even said definitively what system it was gonna be on. So yeah, very, very mysterious little video game. And I'm hopeful that this one hasn't just kind of been, like, development hell sort of swept under the rug. But man, like 6 years is a long time. Even factoring in like COVID, because COVID kind of fucked game development for the whole entirety of 2020 and kind of into 2021 as well. Like even factoring that in, that's still a really long time. So it may have just ended up being one of those kinds of cases where it was a game that they were like conceptually into, but once they started kind of actually making it, they were like, ugh. Because Project Re Fantasy was kind of touted as being sort of like a, Atlus's take on a fantasy game, which is ironically a little bit out of the norm for them because Atlus really kind of made a name from making RPGs that felt a lot more modern than its contemporaries. Like, that's part of why way back in the day, Megami Tensei and SMT really stood out, is that they were games that kind of took place in the modern day. Like, your characters would use technology to summon demons, and they were armed with real guns, and it was just kind of different from the sort of like spells and wizards and crystals and so on that a lot of other games from the era kind of focused on. So yeah, it was sort of an interesting idea to kind of do almost like the inverse of that. To be like, all right, let's make sort of a more kind of traditional fantasy game. So that's one possibility, is just the idea that they thought on paper this seems like a cool idea, ended up not really being something they liked like creating that much. And I think another thing that you should probably kind of factor in is that this game was announced in 2016. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the game started like real development in 2016. In fact, it almost certainly didn't, considering the fact that we never saw any kind of gameplay or anything. But even if it did, it probably would have been something that they would have been designing with the PS4 in mind. So now that we're kind of a couple of years into the PS5, it's like that technology would probably feel a little sketchy by today's standards. So maybe they were kind of like, okay, let's just do it over. So yeah, I'm hoping this one isn't just dead in the water, because I think, like, just based on the art we've seen, it looked pretty cool. I really like the concept of this main character, whoever this is with the red hair. Maybe they'll show up one day and they'll just come out of nowhere and surprise us, be like, yeah, Project Re Fantasy is done, it is coming out this year. And maybe they've just spent the past 6 years on the grind. Like, this thing comes out, it's like the greatest video game ever made. But I don't know, personally, man, I'm kind of just of the belief that when companies are that silent about a game, it tends to not bode very well. Yeah, prayer emoji for Project Re Fantasy. I hope you're not just a dead project. since it seemed like it would have been pretty cool. Alright, next up on the agenda is the long speculated upon Persona 3 remake. I'm sure you have all seen that cool leaked footage of that Atlus or Sega, like, behind closed doors press video or whatever that supposedly showed off the Persona 3 remake. You know, just to be careful, I don't want any Atlus assassins coming after me, so I'm not gonna show it just in case it is real. But at least to me, that footage looked pretty real. That seemed like the kind of thing that would be quite difficult to make. And I also tend to kind of believe in the concept that if a rumor sort of perpetuates itself for that long and that consistently, like, I've seriously been hearing Persona 3 Remake rumors since probably like 2017 or 2018, so, you know, when a rumor tends to just exist for that long, there's usually at least some amount of truth to it. And I figured if this thing was gonna get announced anytime soon, it would have happened at the PlayStation Showcase that they just did a couple days ago, but that ended up not being the case, so. And beyond just kind of like the PlayStation Showcase, I feel like the Persona 25th anniversary was another good chance to announce this, right? I'd imagine now at Atlus there is a real hesitancy to announce games too early, because this is kind of like a flub up that happened with them with two of their biggest releases ever, like Persona 5 and S&T 5, to where they just announced those games like way too early, to the point where it kind of caused a lot of frustration from the fans. I feel like this is sort of a trend that the gaming industry is hopefully kind of moving away from, is the whole, like, you know, Cyberpunk, for example, situation where it's like, let's announce a game that we've, like, not actually started working on at all, but, like, maybe we will probably soon. Like, that whole kind of mentality. Because it just seems to cause a lot of problems and, like, anxiety. So yeah, even though this is not, like, a confirmed thing, obviously, it's, at least to me, it's starting to seem more likely to be true than not. I feel like that and probably another game that starts with a P and ends with the number 6 are the most likely sort of next big things that Atlus will announce. And if not for a Persona 3 remake, like, they can always go back to the port well, a classic Atlus strategy when they need to make a little extra cash and kind of hold people over. Because, I mean, they have a whole ass library of games that they could port over to the Switch or the PC or the PS5 or anything. Like, even though I'm not super crazy about the whole, like, just remaster everything kind of thing that they do, there's a ton of games from the PS2 and especially the 3DS that they could port over and make some cash, especially now that it's sort of been, like, proven that if you put stuff on PC, then we will buy it. Persona 4 and Persona 5 both did really, really well on Steam. I'm not as sure about how the Persona 3 Portable port ended up doing. Say that one 3 times fast. Persona 3 Portable port. But that was mostly because the port was funky. But that's always an option. They could always do, like, HD remasters of Digital Devil Saga or the Raito games. That'd be pretty cool. Hey, yo, make another Raito game. Or bring some of their 3DS games over. Like, you know, S&T 4 and 4 Apocalypse would feel right at home on the Switch. So I'd imagine a couple of those are probably, like, in production as we speak. Alright, so for our next big boy here, we have mainline SMT. So the good news about the future of S&T is that S&T 5 did really, really well. It sold over 1 million units worldwide. So I don't think there's anything to worry about when it comes to the, like, sales front of things. When you sell 1 million units of something, that tends to get the higher-ups' attention, so all the doom and gloom about SMT not sell as well as Persona, therefore Atlus never make another SMT is very unfounded and not true. Now, what I would say for anybody expecting an SMT 6 anytime soon is to not, because mainline numbered SMT games are very, very, very uncommon. One of these games comes out just about once every decade. Like, if you kind of follow the trend here, so the original SMT 1 came out in 1992. SMT 2 wasn't too bad, that came out in 94, 2 years later. Then we see this funny little game called SMT Nocturne come out in 2003, almost 10 years later. 10 years after that, in 2013, SMT 4 comes out. And then in 2021, another almost 10 years later, we get SMT 5. So these numbered mainline games are something that they very, very, very rarely do. You know, it's not like Final Fantasy, which is coming up to number 16. Why is it called the Final Fantasy if there's 16 of them? And what's the deal with airplane food? Hey, what's the deal with SMT? It's like one of these games comes out every 10 years? I mean, what am I saying? So yeah, I would say something having to do with SMT is on the horizon. The sales numbers have definitely proven to Atlus that, like, at least the mainline games, there's still a really big demand for that kind of stuff. Despite what Doomers will tell you, SMT is in fact a healthy franchise. Like, they didn't sell 12 copies of SMT5. Similarly, I think kind of like SMT spin-offs are probably on the horizon. I was tempted to make a video about this when it was kind of relevant, but I was like, I don't really care that much. But when Soul Hackers 2 sold, like, not that great, I know there was a lot of doom and gloom from people who are like, well, it's over, fellas, pack it up. Atlus will never not make Persona ever again. Like, this is sort of a cycle that I've seen kind of repeat itself a lot, where new SMT, like usually some kind of a spin-off or like port or whatever comes out, doesn't sell as well as Persona stuff, and then people freak out and are like, yep, it's over, guys. Well, SMT, it had a good run, but don't expect another game in the series ever again. It's over. And then inevitably they announce something like a year later. So yeah, even though Soul Hackers 2 like didn't sell super well, it wasn't really received that great overall, I don't think it wasn't the kind of game that Atlus was like staking their future on. You know, Soul Hackers 2 wasn't their next Persona 5 or SMT 5. Like this wasn't the thing they were gonna brag about on their earnings report. This wasn't the game that they were expecting to kind of like define the company for the next couple years going forward. But it was definitely more so one of those games that they kind of made to sort of keep the brand going and have a product out to sell. Maybe it might sort of, in the short term, deter them from making, I don't know, like a Soul Hackers 3? Like, I wouldn't expect that fucking game to come out anytime soon, but I don't know, I just don't really agree with the logic of, like, Soul Hackers 2 sold badly, so let's throw the baby out with the bathwater and just never make another non-Persona game ever again. And of course, then we have the big man, the big shit, as it's known on the streets, Persona 6. It's gonna happen. I mean, you know, if Persona 6 came out, it is almost guaranteed to be their best-selling game probably ever. So it's not like all the heads of Atlus and Sega and shit are getting together in a boardroom and are thinking like, nah, no Persona 6. I'm not into it. I don't know. Doesn't sound like a good idea. And like I said, if they're working on it, I'm sure they don't want a repeat of Persona 5 to where it's announced and then it's like, okay, it will come out on this day, and then it did it, and it got pushed back, and then it got pushed back, and then it came out. That's probably something they just are probably pretty done with having, like, that press put on them. It's gonna happen. Honestly, I'm still kind of the mindset that if COVID didn't happen, it probably would have been announced during the 25th anniversary, but they're probably just at a stage where they're not far enough along to really feel comfortable revealing anything. And that's absolutely fine by me. I'd much rather have them kind of like sort of work in secret, work at their own pace until they're really comfortable showing the world this game, instead of there being a mad dash to reveal it and then it's like, okay, well, we're not actually close to having it be done, so yeah, just kind of sit and think about it for another 5 years. So that's sort of what I feel, or I guess what I hope Atlus is kind of going through right now, is this is sort of like a kind of transitionary period where all of the big stuff, I mean the heavy hitters, the Persona 6, the maybe Persona 3 remake if that's actually a thing, the knock on wood Project Re-Fantasy, sort of the big guns are being worked on right now. And so we're kind of just at this unfortunate spot where it's just not really time for them to reveal a lot of this stuff. But I'm really of the opinion that soon we're gonna get into it, right? Like, maybe not in 2023, but I'd say by 2024, that's when stuff is really gonna start kicking. So I guess just think of right now as being like it's a chill period, right? Bro, imagine you're like a CEO and you're giving like a press statement to a whole bunch of investors that are kind of upset you don't really have anything on the horizon. And you're just like, we think of this as a chill period. I'm sure some guy who invested $150 million in your company is gonna be like, yes, a chill period. I love that. That's awesome. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking is going on right now. Like, Project Re-Fantasy might be dead. I don't know. It would be a shame if it is, but at this point, I'm kind of feeling like it's been so long, man. Maybe they kind of just got swept up in Persona 5 being a way bigger thing than they kind of expected it to be. Since even though it's being done by a different studio, like, all the Persona stuff is handled by P Studio, and Project Re-Fantasy was being done by Studio Zero. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's all still the same company. But that definitely seems like a possibility to me, is the idea that just, like, Persona 5 came out, was a huge hit, and they kind of shifted some people around to where it's like, oh, you were at Studio Zero? How about you come work on a Persona 5 Royal? Hey, man, you want to work on SMT5, man? So, I don't know, maybe that's what ended up happening. Persona 3 Remake, I don't know. Might exist, might not. YouTube videos about cryptids be like, Bigfoot, might exist, might not. More SMT stuff, pretty likely, probably not an SMT6 anytime soon. But I think especially now that we've seen the success of the Persona ports on like PS4 and Switch and such, I would expect to see more ports happening. And Persona 6 is basically guaranteed to happen eventually, just like probably not right now. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about all the nothing that is on the horizon. You know, it's brutal out here. Sometimes you just gotta talk about nothing. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.